Welcome to this answer key video for the Week 2 homework in Design 224 CAD Certification at Ivy Tech Community College. And your homework for Week 2 was to go through questions 6 through 10 of the ACE Prep Exam 113 on your own. And I told you in our first video that after you go through these on your own, I would be releasing a video answer key to kind of show you how to work through those 5 problems. So this is that video. We're actually going to work through questions 6 through 10 together. So if you got stuck on a couple of them, hopefully you can see as I work them maybe a way to get past that or a way to find the answer that you didn't think of. So hopefully you got most of the way through a majority of the questions, but if you got stuck on a couple, you can pick that up as we go through this video. So I'm going to go through these somewhat quickly, but I do want to hit the important parts of each question. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into this as if I was taking it. I'll go ahead and hit begin, and remember to read the instructions. And so our first question here is asking us about different printing settings or plotting settings. And they're asking you down here in the plot area essentially what these 4 options do. So it says identify the following plot options based on the desired function from the list. So they give you the 4 options that come from the plot area menu in AutoCAD, and then they give you 4 different descriptions. And the task here basically is to match up each of those descriptions with the appropriate word. Now, the first thing I would warn you about on a question like this is make sure you're typing it in correctly, so don't have any spelling errors. Case sensitivity should not be an issue, but just to be safe, go ahead and type it in all caps. But on the actual test, it shouldn't matter whether it's case sensitive or not. So looking at this, when I test these different plot areas, if I forget, here's a quick, easy way you can check. So I'm going to go ahead and I've just got a new AutoCAD drawing opened up here. And I'm just going to draw some stuff in here that I can kind of use. So I'll draw a couple things and just copy and paste them, just so I have some stuff in here that I can mess with as I try to print. So just some kind of drawing that I can work with. Okay, so I've got some geometry that I generated there, just a bunch of circles. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the plot menu and just choose a printer that is appropriate for your computer. And now I can start playing with these different settings down here. So if I look at the display first, and I'm going to go ahead and center that, I'm going to go ahead and go to a preview. And you'll notice that it takes what is currently visible in my window and it sets that to be what's printed. Now I can change the scaling here too. Instead of fit to paper, I could change that to be a 1:1 scale. But basically what it's doing when I choose display is it's trying to take what is in my window and make that printable. So for instance, if I zoom in like this and go back to plot and I choose display again and center it, now I'm not seeing all the circles, I'm only seeing the part that's in my drawing window. So display basically takes what is in your viewable AutoCAD window in your monitor and scales that to be printable. So going back to our test, if we look at our different options there, we have prints all objects within the printable area of the paper, plots objects in the rectangular area you define, plots all objects in the drawing, and plots objects currently visible in the drawing area. So looking at our display option, to me, that would be this one, plots objects currently visible in the drawing area. So I can only print what I can see. So I'm going to put display in there. And moving on, our next one would be extents. And from experience, I know that the way extents works in AutoCAD is that it will take everything in your drawing area and crunch it to where it fits. So sort of like if you remember, if I do Z enter, E enter on the keyboard, that's a shortcut for zoom extents, where it will zoom back so you can see everything in your drawing window. And plotting extents works the same way. It's basically going to make sure that anything you've drawn anywhere in your AutoCAD file prints out, and it's going to zoom back as far as it needs to catch all that inside of your plot. So going back to our test, we have prints all objects within the printable area of the paper, plots objects in the rectangular area you define, or plots all objects in the drawing. So extents would be basically it zooms back to get the full extents of everything you have drawn. So in this case, that would be extents. And plots objects in the rectangular area you define, that sounds like window to me, where I can, if you're not familiar, I can actually go to my plot menu, and if I choose the window option in here, The window option basically lets me draw out a selection box of what I want to print. So this rectangular area would define, for instance, if I want to print just this area or maybe the whole thing, I can create a custom printing box here where I can choose what I want to print, and then it will scale what I've selected to fit on the page. So that rectangular selection box would describe the window option. So I'm going to go ahead and put window here. And then finally, prints all objects within the printable area of the paper. That would go more for your layout tab in AutoCAD. So for instance, if I was to switch over to my layout tab, here is basically the printable area of my paper, which would be shown by the dotted line or the margin in my printer. So it's basically going to print whatever fits inside there. And if it goes outside the dotted line and you've chosen the layout option when you're plotting, it's not going to plot. So layout only prints what's inside this dotted line. And that's defined by the margins for your printer and the printable area that it has. So going back to our answer key here, our test, I'm going to go ahead and put in layout there. Okay, so this is a popular topic for the test, plotting, and this particular area is very popular because it's necessary to know when you use AutoCAD. So I'd say there's a high possibility of you getting a question like this. All right, question 2 deals with tables. These are not terribly common when you draw in AutoCAD, but it is something that they could test you over. I have seen questions about tables in the past. Now, I don't know if you'll get one or not, but it's good to know how to work these tables because it's not something that people typically know. So here they say, recreate the table below, create a formula in the cells of the area column to multiply length times width, and then down at the bottom, we need to create a sum to add all of those together. And here they're going to ask us what are those resulting values for each of the areas and then finally the sum. So here what I'm going to do, and this is going to be a lot of toggling back and forth, but I'm just going to go off of my printout that I have here. In the actual test, if you're doing a problem like this, they're not going to make you create the whole table and type in all the numbers. Chances are that they would give you the table already created as a file that you would open up, and you would just be responsible for putting in the formulas and entering the answers. So having you do this much work on a question on the actual exam is very rare. You're not going to have to create a table from scratch and type in all the numbers and put in the formulas and key in the answers. They're not going to have you do that much just because there's not time. So on the actual test, if you had a question like this, expect to create the formulas and key the answers in. But we don't have a file to work off of here, so we're just going to create the whole thing from scratch. So if you're not familiar with tables, if I go to my Annotate tab, I have a tables section over here, and I can just go to make a new table, or you can type in table on your keyboard. That will do the same thing. And in this particular case, I'm going to have 3 columns. I want my first row to be a title row. I want my second row to be a header, so I can put in column titles. And then at the bottom, I want to have some data rows. And in this particular case, we need 5 data rows. So I'm going to put in 5 here. So 3 columns, 5 data rows, title, header, data, and this particular information here doesn't really matter. So all this other stuff you can kind of ignore for what we're doing. So I'll hit OK and just place the table somewhere, and then I'll probably need to zoom way in so I can see. So if I zoom in here, okay, now I can type whatever I need to in here. So for instance, they have table here, length, whoops. Length, here we have width, here we have area, and then looking at our particular values here, we have 4.1598, 2.1369. You can hit tab also to jump between these if you're not familiar with that, so just hit tab to jump between the cells. Okay, so I've got all my values keyed in there. It might be useful to double check those because you don't want to miss an answer just because you keyed something in wrong. So double check that you've got everything typed in right. And then to actually put in the cells, this works a little bit like Microsoft Excel if you're familiar with that. And if you're not, here's how you do it. Let me go ahead and put my title in here, sum. So in my area, I'm going to say equals, and equals tells AutoCAD that I'm typing in a formula. And I'm just going to say, to calculate the area for this room, which would be length by width, I'm going to say A3 times B3. And if I hit enter, it will actually put a field in there that calculates those two numbers multiplied by one another. Now, you could do the same thing here. In this one, I could do A4 times B4, A5 times B5, and so on and so forth. But I also have an autofill option. So if I click my first one, I can actually use this autofill diamond right here and just draw down to right here and click. Now notice I don't autofill this one because I need to put a different unique formula in here. So after I calculate all my areas, then I can come down here and say equals, and I could do C3 plus C4 plus C5 plus C6. You could do it that way. Or you could also say sum, open parentheses, so add up everything from C3 to C6. So you could do it that way also. Okay, and then I get an answer that I could key in. So now I can take these answers and key them into the actual test. So I'm going to Alt-Tab back, and keying these in, I went ahead and scribbled my answers down on a piece of paper after I worked through this one. So I'll just key them in here. So you can tell I've kind of worked through part of this on my own already outside the video just to kind of speed things up so you don't have to watch me do every single keystroke here. And remember, you are allowed a piece of scrap paper and a pencil during the test, so if you need to jot down numbers like this, you can. Okay, so there I've got my answers typed in. I'll just hit save. Okay, now going to this next one. This is probably, in my opinion, the hairiest question that I had for you on this particular section of the practice test. So what they want you to do is use the dimensions that they've given you here, and you're supposed to construct this shape with this outline that has the 3 circles inside of it, and the 0, 0 point should be right here at the corner of this red triangle should be the 0, 0 point. And then they tell you in the instructions, after you get that shape drawn, they want you to draw 2 little construction lines. So 1 inch this way and 1 inch up this way connected to each of these 2 corners. And you're going to use those as the starting point for a set of baseline dimensions. So to get this question right, you have to have the basic sketching skills to draw this out. You have to understand what a construction line is, but most importantly, you have to understand what a baseline dimension is and how to create one. And they also give you some specific instructions here about putting the dimensions on the drawing. So they say your dimension styles have to be set up as follows. Baseline spacing is 1/2 inch. Your scale should be annotative. Your text should be 0.120 tall. And your annotation scale should be 1 to 4. And from that point on, you basically place the dimensions as shown. So the idea is that you place this one on first, and then use the baseline dimension command off of it to build all the other ones, and I'll show you how to do that. And then you would place this dimension and base all of these other ones off of that. Okay, and then once you get those put in, then you can start to look up this information. So they say, what are the coordinates of point A? Well, you would have point A after you dimension the drawing, so you could get that. Point B is up here, so you can look up those coordinates after you've dimensioned. And then they want the distance from C to D and C to E, which would be from the center of this extension line to the circle and the center to this circle. So the trick on this is, can you dimension the drawing after you sketch it out? And again, this is really more work than they're going to have you do on the actual test. On the actual test, they would probably give you the drawing already created and have you dimension it and then look up the lengths. They're not going to have you create the drawing from scratch also. That's just too much work. So on the actual test, you probably see something like this. So I went ahead and kept mine after I drew it out. And then notice I left this construction line in here that helped me locate this circle. So they give you this line that is at an angle, and it's 5.5 inches long at 30 degrees. So I went ahead and left that in there just because I thought it might be useful. But to actually set up the dimension style, so they give you all those parameters for dimension styles. Remember, you can type in dim style on your keyboard to get into that menu. Or if you don't know that, you can also go to your annotate tab and hit this little tiny arrow right here, which will take you to your dimension styles. Now they told us to use an annotative dimension style with a 1 to 4 scale, so make sure you have annotative selected here. So highlight it and hit set current so that it becomes your active dimension style. And then I'm going to highlight it again and go into modify so I can check those settings. Now mine are already correct because I just finished this problem to make sure I was doing it correctly. But if you go up to the lines tab, they've told you to change the baseline spacing, and by default this baseline spacing is going to be on 0.38 probably. They tell us to change that to 0.5, and then on our text tab they said change our text height to 0.120. Okay, so we make those two setting changes, make sure annotative is active, and then we can hit OK and back out of there. So I'll hit close. And then also they tell me that my annotation scale down here should be 1 to 4. So yours is probably set on 1 to 1 by default, so change that to 1 to 4. And then what I can do is I can start dimensioning. So on my annotate tab, I'm going to grab a linear dimension, and I'm supposed to place the arrowheads for my first dimension at the end point of this line. But if you look, I'm actually dimensioning for my first dimension from this bottom line to the center of this circle. Okay, and I'm actually coming over here and I'm supposed to place it using my endpoint OSNAP right there. Now, I could do the same thing over and over, but you're not going to get the right answer if you do that. So instead of using the linear dimension tool over and over, if I come over a couple buttons here, I have my baseline dimensioning tool, which means that I use this first dimension as a reference and I dimension off of it several other times. So I'm going to go to baseline, and now I can sort of just go through and click anything that I want to dimension. So I want to dimension to the center of this circle, which should be 9.5 according to the print. Up to here should be 12. Up to here should be 13.5, and then all the way to the end should be 18.5. Okay, so I've got those. Now I can hit escape, and then I'm going to put a dimension up here also to match what they show on the print. So I'm going to put this dimension of 3 on and then do my baseline dimensioning trick again. Okay, so back in my drawing, I'm going to go to my linear dimension tool one more time, and this time I'm going to dimension from here to here. So I get that dimension of 3, and then my little construction line that I made up here tells me where to place that dimension. So look for your OSNAP, your endpoint OSNAP right there. So I'll go ahead and place that one. Now I'll go back to my baseline dimension tool and pick up the rest of those dimensions that I'm missing. So I need the dimension of 5 that goes to the center of this circle. I need 7 that goes to the edge of this notch, 11.25 to the center of this other circle, and then 14 all the way to the corner. And then hit escape a couple times. So now we can start looking up some information that they're asking us. So in the question, the first thing they tell us is, or the first thing they ask us is, what are the coordinates of point A? So we have to find the end of that extension line, and I can do that by using the ID command. So let me close this out since we're done with it. Okay, so I'm just going to grab the ID command, type in ID on your keyboard, and just pick this point. So the coordinates for that point are negative 9.7200, and my y coordinate is 0.0000. So make sure you key that in exactly as it shows up in AutoCAD. So don't take off any zeros, don't add any zeros, don't leave the leading zero off. So make sure you type it in exactly as you see right here. Don't try to alter it in any way. Then they also ask me for the coordinates of point B, which is this particular point up here. So I can do the ID command on that, and I get 14.0000 and 28.2200. So that would be the coordinates for that one. And then finally they ask me for the distance from C to D and C to E. Now, to make this easy, what I usually do is just draw a line and then do the list command on it. So point C is right here at the midpoint of this extension line. Point D is at the center of this circle. Okay, so I'll draw a line there, and then draw another line from the center of that extension line to the other circle, which is point E. Now I can just use the list command on each of these. So if I choose that line and type in list, you could also use properties. So if I go to list, I can find the length right here, 13.2859, and easily key that in. And then I can do the same thing for the other one. So if I choose it and type in list, that will give me the other distance that I'm looking for, which is 19.0016. So having all that information now, I can go back to the test by doing Alt-Tab, and I can start keying in some of those answers. So negative 9.7200, tab. And again, make sure you aren't taking off any decimal places or adding any. Okay, and I'll go ahead and save my answer. All right, and then going on to question 4, getting close to the end here. This is a fairly easy question if you're good with polylines. It shouldn't take you very long. So they say, start a new drawing using the AutoCAD template. Using a polyline, draw 2 segments as shown below left. So I have a straight polyline segment and an arc polyline using the dimensions that they show here. Then they say, what is the length of arc AB? And what is the area of the shape on the right after I close the polyline? So you have to do it as 2 separate segments so you can find the length of this polyline. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new drawing. So I'll go ahead and close out this one I've been doing. And they tell us to use the AutoCAD template, so I'll go to New, choose AutoCAD, and I'm going to turn the grid off. And I'm going to go right into my polyline command. And the first one they say is 4 inches at 30 degrees. And in this particular problem, it doesn't matter where the start point is. So I'm just going to pick a point at random. And I'm going to say 4 tab 30. That's going to give me a line 4 inches long at 30 degrees. Now I could go ahead and switch over to the arc command down here, but in order to find the length of that arc, I need to actually exit out, go back into the polyline command, pick that start point, and then switch to arc again. That way I have 2 separate line segments. And I know that from end point to end point on this arc is 4 inches down vertically. So I'm going to type in 4 using my OTRAC command and hit enter. I can hit escape a couple times, and there I have the rough shape that they're asking. So if I click on this arc, I can do the list command, and the problem with drawing this in one shot is if these are connected, when you do the list command, it's going to give you the length for the entire polyline, and you're going to end up with the wrong answer. So make sure when you draw this and you choose the arc that you're only getting the arc, not the straight line segment as well, because they don't want that. They just want the arc. So I'm going to type in list, and the length of that arc is 9.6736. Okay, and then to finish the question, they tell you to take these two and use pedit, or the polyline edit command, and join them together, and then close the shape and tell them the area of the inside. So if you don't know how to use pedit, you could also just redraw the shape and close it and hatch it in. So remember, you don't always have to do this exactly the way they're telling you to. So if you don't know how to use pedit, here's another way you could do it. Pick your start point, go 4 at 30 degrees, switch to an arc, go down 4, switch back to a line, close the shape, hatch it in, do the list command on the properties of the hatch that you created, and you should get 20.4077, which is the correct answer. Okay, so if you don't know how to use the polyline edit command, you can still get the right answer, just as long as you end up with the shape they want. So remember, there's more than one way to do these problems. You can kind of sidestep the instructions sometimes and still get the correct answer. So to do it correctly, the way that they asked, here's how you can do it. I'm going to go into pedit, which is also hidden up here under your draw menu if you want the actual tool. I'm going to go to pedit, and it says select polyline or multiple. So I have 2 polylines, so I'm going to go to multiple so I can select both of them. So I'll choose the arc and the line and hit enter. And now I get all of my options for editing these polylines, and I'm supposed to join them together. So I'm going to go to join, and it'll say enter fuzz distance. I'm going to leave that at 0 and hit enter. So now I have one polyline segment that's continuous, and now I need to close it. So I'm going to choose close and then hit escape. So now I have one continuous polyline, just like as if I had drawn it over here in one command. But now I can take that and use the hatch command, either by typing H on the keyboard or choosing hatch from the ribbon. I can hatch in the inside of that shape, close it, select it, and type in list, or go to properties and find the area there the same way, 20.4077. So on this particular question, there's more than one way to skin a cat, so you don't have to do it the way that they say, but probably a good idea if you know how already to make sure that you do it as close as what they're asking. But you can get around it sometimes if you're not sure. So going back, the length of that arc that I found was 9.6736. I jotted these down as I was working through, and 20.4077. Okay, then lastly, our final question here, once I save my answers, gives us some different information about multifunction grips. So remember, multifunction grips are the blue dots or blue symbols in AutoCAD for specific shapes. If you hover over them, it will give you additional options. So they give us a number of options here, and we're basically tasked with matching up each of these particular commands with the correct list of options that would show up in the multifunction grip for that command. So what I would usually do is kind of just make each one of these on my AutoCAD drawing and then hover over it and see what the multifunction grips are. So starting out, I'm just going to make an arc, a leader, a spline, and a polyline. And looking at this, we only have 4 options here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 provided commands. So 2 of these aren't going to get used. And looking at this right off the bat, I'm going to throw out dimension just by process of elimination, because dimension is not really a specific command, it's a category of commands. So I know right off the bat that if I look at dimension, they can't really pin any of these specific multifunction commands to this, because dimension itself is not really a individual command. You know, I could have linear dimensions or baseline dimensions or radius, diameter dimensions, or ordinate dimensions, but just saying dimension is too generic to really assign any of these particular features to. So I'm going to throw that out. And then I'm going to show you also why you can throw out multi-text real quick, or multi-line text. So if I go to mText, I'm just going to delete this last question here. So we'll just delete all this stuff out. If I put in some multi-line text, just by drawing a text box and then I type some text in here, if I click on that, I get some grips that pop up, and they are multifunction grips, but they don't have any names associated with them. So hovering over this is just what lets me change the column width. This one lets me change the column height to control the text wrapping. And then finally, this multifunction grip just lets me move the object. So this isn't really what I would term a multifunction grip. These to me are just regular grips. So that's why I would throw multi-text out. And you're basically at that point focusing on your first 4 options: arc, leader, spline, and polyline. So to determine which of these goes with which, I don't know off the top of my head, and I've been using AutoCAD for 10 years. I could probably make some guesses, but to be sure, I'm just going to draw each of these 4 options in AutoCAD and then see what the options say when I hover over them. So this is one of those instances where you can use AutoCAD to tell you the answer. So I'm going to go back into AutoCAD, and I'm just going to draw an arc. Okay, I'm going to throw in a leader, just a leader arrow right here with some text. I'm going to make a polyline. Okay, so there's my polyline. And finally, we need a spline, which the spline is hidden underneath your draw menu right here. Okay, so there is my spline. And I can get rid of this multi-line text. We don't need it anymore. Okay, so starting with the arc, if I click on my arc, here are my multifunction grips. And if I hover over them, I get options of stretch and lengthen, stretch and radius, stretch and lengthen, and then this one would move it. So for this one, we're looking at stretch, lengthen, and radius. So going back here, that would match up with this one, stretch, lengthen, and radius. So I know that this one's the arc. Okay, then moving on, I'm going to go to my leader. And looking at this, it would probably make sense that it's the top one, stretch, lengthen, landing, and add leader. So this is kind of a key to me that these 2 would go together just because it says add leader. But I'm going to double check and make sure. So hovering over these, I get stretch, lengthen, landing, add leader, and remove leader. Okay, so that is in fact the correct one. So up here, I'm just going to say leader for this one. And looking at these other ones, at this point you could probably match the 2 up. So I have left the options of polyline and spline. Since we just did this polyline command, I already know that this one is polyline, stretch, add vertex, remove vertex, and convert to arc. that sounds very familiar with the polyline question we just did. So I'm going to say that that one is polyline. And if you're not sure, you could go in here and hover over it. Okay, so here I have stretch, add vertex, convert to arc, remove vertex. So you can go in there and hover over it and see which by process of elimination would make this one spline. Okay, so you could go in there and hover over that one also and check it. Okay, so that's all 5 of our questions. So hopefully that gives you some insight into how I would attempt these questions. Now, it's not the only way to do it, but it is one way to go through and do it. And then you could save that and submit it. So if there's a couple of these that you missed, or you couldn't figure out, maybe you tried the practice test a couple times and you were getting, 8 out of 10 points or 8.5 out of 10 points, and you couldn't figure out why you weren't getting a 10 out of 10. Maybe this video will push you over the edge, and if you go back and try it one more time now, you can get that 10 out of 10 score that you were looking for. So I'm hoping that you'll go back and correct the ones that you missed, because that means you're actually learning something and you are getting better at this process of preparing for the AutoCAD Certified Professional Exam. So at this point, I can go ahead and save and submit, and hopefully I didn't key anything in wrong, because according to my answer key, I should have a 10 out of 10 there. Okay, and I did. I got a 10 out of 10, so everything we have there is correct. And the nice thing, it will tell you also when it grades your test is which questions you missed, so you can focus on the ones that you did or did not get right. So that's just some help on this first answer key for ACE Prep Exam 113, questions 6 through 10. This video is not required, but just some extra help for you as you go through and prepare for the test. So go through now and try it again on your own if you weren't happy with your score, or if you were happy with your score, go ahead and go on to the next practice test. And if you have any questions, as always, you can email me, jhamilton83@ivtech.edu. If you're nearby at the Indianapolis campus, you can stop by my office, room T316 of the Glick Technology Building. And that'll be it for this video. So good luck, give it a try on your own, and I'll see you in our next video.